First and foremost, thank you all for turning up today's session. These are pretty tough times, and you can see down in Victoria, accountants and planners and also lawyers aren't allowed into their offices. So that's not Victoria, down in Melbourne, which is a pretty tough system. Obviously at Abbott-Family, we work virtually, so in a pretty good position anyway. The main one there is also there's so many webinars online, so you need to be really careful about when you do spend your time, where you're spending it on, so that, my goal is I never go down and just do dross and rubbish. It's always really high edge, not high edge stuff that's based on ATO rulings, etc. So, and particularly with some of the advanced case studies we're looking at, and it's quite funny, since I did this last week, I've probably had about 4 or 5 more, which have been really difficult. And as you guys are strategists and licensees, you're in an elite position, so please feel free to contact me directly at grant@ilovesmsf.com, or just on my phone number, personal phone number 0418 735 491, and contact me if you have an issue, because I can probably clear up a lot of your stuff very quickly. And obviously we're moving into some pretty tough times over the next few years, so it's important for us to look for those other elements. But while the going is going to get tough, obviously the tough get going. I think I read that somewhere, or that's Billy Ocean's song. We went through this last week. Look, LRBAs have been around for a long time. We're starting to see ins and outs. I want to cover this case study. I want to get into a bit further. We'll look at where we went last week, and then I'm going to go straight into having the tax office. And I want to start giving this a little bit of a twist and start looking at how we go from just straight property to potentially property development, so on and so forth. So I've got John Smith's a builder and is looking to retire, and he buys and develops land into house and land packages, completing each development through a company for asset protection purposes as per his accountant's advice, which is pretty typical. His latest development is in Develop Proprietary Limited, has left the company with 2 completed houses valued at $650,000, each standing side by side at Majimba in the Sunshine Coast. There's a profit of $150,000 on each property, which is accessible to the company upon disposal. John wants to rent the companies out to provide him with retirement income. So obviously that CGT issue is not going to be an issue at all, because we've got a position. I'm going to show you something really interesting a little bit later on, and we sort of covered it last week. So he wants to rent the properties out, and that's going to provide his retirement income. But obviously, he can take a certain amount out as, I suppose, employee fees or bonuses or directors' bonuses, but the rest is going to come out as franked dividends, which isn't too bad. Now, the company holds only the properties, so there's no borrowings. So that's really important. So remember, we looked at section or SIS regulation 1322C. And I'll briefly go over those, but essentially SIS regulation 1322C applies for a company or unit trust. And if you remember, that is specifically exempted from the in-house assets test under section 71(1)J of the SIS Act. So that says that the commissioner may make regulations, or the government may make regulations in relation to companies or unit trusts, etc., that are exempt from in-house assets tests. So by being exempt, effectively what it means is that a SMSF can hold 100%, not 5, not 10, not 20 or 30, but 100% in a SIS 1322C company or trust. And so it's a good mechanism, but if you remember before, we looked at, and I think if hopefully I've got from last week, you can see here, I'm just doing a bit of work here. If I can have a look at, there you go, SIS regs. So if I have a look down here, remember there were some caveats about what could or could not be done in a 1322C trust. and we're right here. So 1322C, remember we went through this, and I want to come in because this is a really important part of this discussion. So this regulation applies to an asset of a super fund as an investment in a company or unit trust, and was acquired by the fund on or after commencement of this division. So it means, therefore, it's excluded from the definition of in-house assets test, and therefore it's a super fund can hold 100%. So essentially, the main thing is the fund's got fewer than 5 members. That's okay. The company or trustee is not party to a lease or related party unless the lease relates to a business real property. So what happens is the SIS Act is there to monitor compliance by trustees and also their advisors and investment managers. And so as a consequence of this, you'll find that the SIS Act cannot say what it doesn't look through unit trusts. It doesn't look through companies. This is the one instance where it does look through, but it does on a concessional basis because it's saying this is not an in-house asset. Therefore, what we're doing is we're corralling you in these various areas. So again, if you do put a property in there, and you can, in this instance, we've got a couple of resi properties, a couple of residential properties that bizarrely, we said before that if these were in the name of the builder themselves, we could potentially transfer them over. Well, it's a tough one because to transfer them over into the SMSF, which is the desired place to be because he wants to be retired, it's nice to be employed and all the franked dividends, but honestly, they're better off inside the self-managed super fund, as many of you would be aware, because he hasn't got a T-bar issue, it's tax-free. Look, I'm not preaching, I'm preaching the converted here. So, but to transfer it over, we need to meet the business real property definitions. And the fact that he's retired, is no longer building anymore, it's probably a 70% chance that those properties are not business real property. If we're talking about 5 or 6 years ago when he was right in the midst of his property business, yes, I would say absolutely they're business real property, particularly in the companies. Maybe if they're in his own name, it's a bit, we'd have to have a look at it. But here, it's not business real property. So the issue is when we do that transfer over, we've got a problem. But remember we had a look at section 66, and that basically said that if you are exempt under section 71J, so, and look, where are we looking at? We're looking at section 71J, that's where 1322C comes in, then effectively those assets can be transferred into a self-managed super fund. Now, for that part, for example, let me show you how this works. Imagine if I had a company like this, and inside that company there were Jaguar motor vehicles, antiques, paintings, collectibles, a whole lot of stuff. So sitting in a company. Now, if I couldn't transfer those directly into a self-managed superannuation fund. Why is that? Because obviously if it went from the company to the SMSF, which would be a related party, that doesn't fit within the business real property definition. However, I can transfer the shares of that company into the self-managed super fund because I'm using section 71J and provided it then fits into 1322C. So remember, I've got my motor vehicle, I've got my Jaguar car, my collectibles and all that. So let's work out how that is. So here, it's basically saying you can have residential property sitting in there, which is fine. You can have business real property, but when we look through, when the tax office looks through and starts to see that residential property is being leased back to an individual, such as a child or a parent or someone who's related, except for related trusts, etc., then effectively residential will be caught. So therefore, we fall outside 1322C straight away. So we wouldn't even make it there. and then we couldn't transfer the shares over. We couldn't do that. But if it's business real property and it's being leased back, absolutely, there's not a drama there. And then, of course, if there is a lease arrangement, it doesn't, and we have a look at it with a related party, it must be legally binding, which means obviously there needs to be in writing. And look, you guys are strategists, so you've got the best system in the world in front of you. In fact, we're just going through the process now of upgrading our system. It's probably going to take about 7 to 8 months, but our new system is going to be absolutely amazing. You'll be able to offer now to your clients, if they don't speak, if English is not their native language, you'll be able to offer it in different languages, for example, Chinese or Vietnamese. You'll still have the English document, but you also have a Chinese or a Vietnamese document for them to sign, and both will be legally valid. So that's an interesting scenario where we're going to. And then with that one, we're going to find that we had meetings with the relevant hot dogs, or Abacus Next, which is the largest provider of hot dogs around the world, or actually owns hot dogs. And they were so surprised at what we have achieved through our current hot dogs platform, which is really 20 years old. So that this new one they're doing, it's already blowing them away. So we've achieved so much more. So again, you've got the best of the best, which is why we've seen a few legal firms jump onto our system. Anyway, so it's not party to a lease. We've got the Trump, we've got the, there must be legally binding. That's a back-to-back, so don't really worry about that one. Oops. So the company does not have any outstanding borrowing, so you can't even have an overdraft. So that's the big one. No borrowings at all. So in this instance, okay. So before we do 1322C, it's pretty good. You know, for some of your clients have got companies or unit trusts, probably more companies. If you've got cash, etc., it's not a bad idea to have a look at whether it fits into 1322C. Just a bit of a heads up there. Just clear out that borrowings. Look at the balance sheet. Now, the other thing is that the assets of the company or unit trust do not include an interest in another entity. So, for example, you can't have shares or units in anything else. So when we have a look at it, you can have residential property, rural property, Airbnb you could have in there. That's absolutely perfect. We can have the Jaguar motor vehicle, because that's not an interest. We can have the art collection. We can have the antiques. We can have a whole lot of stuff that's sitting in there. So it's more the chunky stuff that goes in there. So we can't have an interest in another entity, and we can't have a loan to another entity. So any entity at all. So we can't use that unless it's a term deposit or something with the banking. And we can't have a charge over any of those assets. So if for example, we had a property there and we effectively put a charge in it, then what will happen is effectively 1322D applies. And what that says is if Regulation 1322B and 1322C applies to an asset, this regulation ceases to apply to asset if any of the following events happens. So the number of fund increased to 5 or more, which is going to be so interesting. When we get to 6-member funds, they're going to have to change that, obviously. The fine becomes an asset, an interest to another entity, a loan, the fund borrows money or gives a charge, the company or trustee conducts a business. So again, we just got to be careful about that development stuff. And that's why I generally don't recommend a 1322C to do a development, because it might cross over to business. But if it's just a once-off development and we get a good ruling, yeah, look, I think it'd be okay. And what will happen is that if we do pick up 1322D, then it means suddenly our assets, our existing assets, go over that 5% level, which would mean, for example, now let's say we had a 1322C, we decided to do a property development in that 1322C. Then at the end of this year, which is, and listen to me carefully, because this is a really good strategy, but you might need to listen to this a couple of times. By 30 June 2021, what we need to do is work out the amounts of our assets that are in excess of in-house assets. So we look at our total value of assets. The amount is caught under 1322D. Look at our percentage. And then what we need to do is work out that excess amount. Look, it might be $1 million, for example. We need to then go through a process of disposing of that by 30 June 2022. So in this instance, it wouldn't be, look, I'm really comfortable he's in 1322C anyway. But if he wasn't, so for example, let's say that John decided to just rent the house to Max, his son, then obviously if he put it in there, it's okay. And as soon as he starts renting it out to Max, his son, then 1322D kicks in because the company or trustee becomes a party to a lease with a related party that's not business real property. So as a consequence of that, what would happen is that we work out the value of the property. Generally, most of it's going to be, it depends on the size of the fund, but a lot of it's going to be subject to in-house assets test. So what will happen is we'll have to drop the property out of the superannuation fund. When he's over 60, he's retired, so it's not a big issue. So you can actually play around with 1322C quite well. The main thing, as I said, is you can transfer a 1322C company, shares or a unit trust in and not have to worry about a direct transfer. So, for example, a residential property, if I had that in my own name, I wouldn't be able to transfer that in. But if it was in a company or a trust, then I could transfer it in, which is a crazy scenario. But you don't want to then put it from a individual's name up to company or trust and then transfer it in. They tried that in Lock versus FCT, and the anti-avoidance rules under Section 85 applied. So there is around 1322C in relation to property development. It's just exactly what I said before, is that the danger is if you use a 1322C company or trust and it's held to be a business, then effectively what you're going to find is that we have to go through that process under Section 82 and also Section 84, which means that we have to divest ourselves, which is fine, I mean, if we understand that. And what we've done from there is then goes on, and this is important. And what I do is it's really important for all of you to really have a look at this session with the Commissioner. We gave this out to all the trade, and I think there was about 10 or 15 articles as a consequence of it. So you really need to listen to it. And I'll send the links to you as well, along with these slides. But the important thing out of this is that with the 1322C, with the property development, there are issues. We can do it. He is very reticent. Again, when we have a look at joint ventures, mainly about, and look, I see a number of them. We have done at Abbott-Family a few structured joint ventures. You've just got to be really careful about the way that you do it and achieve it. But it can be done, notwithstanding. Obviously, the best would be, for example, if Kush and I were doing a property development and we had 50% each in our SMSF or our trusts, such that we didn't breach the related party rules, the related trust, then effectively we can do whatever we want. We can charge the asset, we can borrow, we can do, we can virtually do whatever we want. So from that perspective, that's the best, but we're looking at some clients just don't want that. Now, we're also looking down the track here of an LRBA, and so I'm getting to it in an obtuse way. For the existing LRBAs that are in the system, so what we've got here is we've got the shares that he's got there. To go in, he's got just to finish off, he's got the family super fund. got equal balances. So they're not even anywhere near the state of play that they've got T-bar. So, it's silly having those properties over into the super fund. So he's decided to retire and travel. Probably the worst time to do that at the moment. And look, my heart goes out to everyone who's in lockdown, particularly down in Melbourne, and I can see how cold it is down there. It's such a tough time. So we're looking at restructuring. This is it's advanced, but it's not overly advanced. So what we've got to do is we've had a look at the law. We've looked at Section 67, which is okay. I'm going to come back to this case study. I'm going to build the documentation for you, but what I want to do is just park it over the side for your existing clients who've got a self-managed superannuation fund. So if they've got an existing SMSF and they've got business real property, effectively what we can do out of this process is that we can go down the track here, go on to the Lightyear site. If I can get that up, I'll actually go up this one. So, sorry, I'll send you that link. I can go to the Lightyear site and I can do rental reduction. So I can do this agreement. It follows in with the Commonwealth guidelines. It's flexible because it carries on as per the government guidelines until JobKeeper finishes, which is going to be the end of March, and who knows what goes on from there. So from that perspective is if we're doing a rental reduction, then if that's going back to my business, and there's a couple of things here, if it's going back to my business, then the super fund and also my family trust or company can negotiate for a lower rent. Now, ordinarily, that would be gnarly because it's a non-arm's length expense. It's been a reduction in that expense. So as a consequence of that, then the gnarly rules would generally apply. However, Steve Keating basically said they're about to issue a quite detailed paper, a guidance note in relation to this. So I don't want to steal his thunder, but I want to put you on notice because you know how sometimes it takes a while. But essentially what they're going to be looking at is they're not going to take any gnarly compliance or other issues around that up until 30 June 2021. So obviously that gives that flexibility. And to me, it's a huge bonus. So it means we can go in and do it straight away. Again, he states in there it needs to be shown that it's legal. You'll find this document rides over the top of an existing commercial lease. So it doesn't impact the commercial lease, but it goes through all the T's and C's. So this is the perfect document for any of those clients that do have SMSFs and adjusted it. If they're adjusting their rent down, they don't have an agreement like this, then you've got gnarly issues. The reverse side is, which is what we're looking at today, is the LRBA. On that side, if we've got the interest expense going down, then obviously we've got exactly the same, is that the SMSF has borrowed and effectively now, I don't know if you saw it, I will come back at a later stage and I'll have to wheel around because I'm running out of time. I could really do about 4 parts on this, on that guideline the Commissioner gave around the ability now to have the loan through the holding trust rather than the SMSF, provided the documentation structured correctly. Anyway, so if we give a mortgage holiday, and it's got to be something commensurate with what the commercial banks are doing, so you can virtually do a zero tax holiday. Likewise, we talk about gnarly. I mean, that's what gnarly was originally designed for. So again, it's a non-arm's length expense reduction. So we're not paying full market value, which again creates various issues. And the Commissioner has basically said, look, we're working up a guidance, but I'm here to tell you that we're not going to take any compliance action up to 30 June 2021. So hopefully it will be over by then. So we can really go in and make those adjustments as we see fit. If you've already got one of our pre-existing LRBAs, then you're okay. So the other, and I'll cover the other one, we'll go through a couple of issues there. So the big question that I put in after the case study is we had a look at the LRBA laws in the background. We looked at the assets for Section 66 and the transfer. Remember, we could transfer the property in, but I'm saying is we have to prove their business real property. So generally you need to do it before he retires, or we can transfer the shares and develop, because from doing my analysis, I've cleared everything up and that's all that's sitting in there. So the company holds only the properties and there's no borrowings. So effectively we can transfer that in. So when we have a look for that one, what we need to do is I want to go in and have a look at the utilisation of the Commissioner's guidelines. I'm going to look at, first thing I'm just going to look at transferring the property in. I'm assuming here that the property itself meets the business real property definition. So we've ticked it off, we're happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my related party loan. And I've had a few questions around this, so we just got to be really careful about that. You can actually transfer shares in, and the guidance note on that, remember, is a 50% LVR that we've got, and the interest rate's, I think, about 7.5%. We'll go and have a look. What we're going to do is I'm just going to look at this one. So I'm going to start the document. You guys, again, have got all of this because it's, you know, your strategist, so you can do this to heart's content. I'm going to do Abbott test. So I'm going to start it up, and that will now come into this system. And you're going to find our new system isn't hugely different to this. It does look a lot better and a lot cleaner, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's whether the damn thing works really well, which it does. So we've got the Smith BRP transfer. So you can see this meets the ATO guidelines. So a lot of people come and say, look, I want to transfer this in as a related party. You know, should I use a holding trust? So they'll go in here, and then we go down the track here, and typically you'd look at your borrowing stuff. So you've got SMSF borrowing. They'll go in and they'll use the non-bank lending pack. The problem is all that does is the holding trust. So it doesn't do the SMSF minutes, it doesn't do the mortgage deed. Well, sorry, what you have to do to meet the Commissioner's guidelines, as we'll see, is to do the holding trust, a related party loan, and also mortgage deed. So I'd have to go out of here, I'd take this one here, I could then go back into my product categories. I would then need to go down into the commercial agreements, and then I would need to do the loan agreements here, plus I would also use the mortgage agreement, which is required under the law, and I'd use that. So I'm going to have to get the data, put it in and out. So, and you know, my focus is on automation. So this is one of the first automations that we built. So what I've got here is a system that does everything, which we'll go through. So you're best using we're just using basic stuff like loan agreements, etc. Just use your own tag, but if not, then, you know, feel free to use the Abbott-Morley tag. So we've got the superannuation fund. So we've got the Smith super fund. We've got a corporate trustee, and we'll just put in there Smith nominees, Pty Limited. Okay, so we'll go through. Oops. So hit the caps lock. Cross my fingers. Sydney, New South Wales, 2,000. 2+ directors. So we'll do 2, just confirm that, and then all I have to do is just put the details in. So I've got John Smith. And you guys don't understand how good this is, because previously in past years, I would talk about all the strategies you can do. Now I've actually got a whole system, and an automated system at that helps us. So I put in the details of the fund, which is okay. Now we're going to have the first thing that this automation does, and this is the one I don't see in any automation, which is an issue. So that this is the trustee meeting, where the trustees consider the acquisition of the LRBA single acquirable asset. So remember, we're acquiring it from the company, so we can only acquire one at a time, because each one has to be acquirable asset, unless it's a collection. Remember, we looked at collection last week. They've all got the same kind, and we'll look at that when we come around to companies. So what we do there is we're going to have a meeting with John and Sally, who chaired. So we've got the John. Now it's obviously going to be Smith Street, so all I do is select, and that pops in. So we've had the trustee meeting. Now we're going to have the holding trust. So come up with something I like. In fact, I like putting as a holding trust or bear trust. So it might be 5 Smith Street Bear Trust. What date is it going to be established? I'll just make that tomorrow. Trustee is an individual or a company. Now, generally, if you're working with a bank, you'll need to be a company, but we can make it an individual. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make it John Smith. And eventually, we'll have a system, with our new systems coming on, you'll be able to warehouse all this detail. So just pop up like our common parties. So that's the holding trust is done. So that's how quick it is. So I've had the meeting talking about the acquirable asset and doing a related party loan. I've now set up the holding trust. And this is the minutes of the holding trust, because again, the holding trust, and I'll just put that in tomorrow. The holding trust, or the trustee of the holding trust, which is John Smith, has to make a decision. There needs to be minutes to the effect that they are acquiring that property at 5 Smith Street. Now we go into the related party information. So who's going to be the lender here? So when we have a look at it, the property is sitting inside the company. Unless we're going to liquidate the company, the property is going to sit inside the company. So we're going to potentially transfer it from the company. So we're going to put, it actually comes from Develop, remember? That was the Pty Limited. Develop Pty Limited, put in our ACN, and then we have the same, obviously. So 5 Smith Street, Sydney, New South Wales 2000. And we'll just do sole director there for John Smith, just to save us time. Okay, so we've got the related party lender in. Okay, so now we go down, because it's a property, we need to go down and what's the property that we're going to be looking at. So we'll put 100 Brown Street, and we'll put that up at Gosford, New South Wales, and whatever that is. So I'll just put 500. I'm not sure what that is. Folio number, if we can find that. Again, the more identifiers, the better. So the consideration that we are paying for it, I think the value of it, if I remember correctly, I just want to make sure that I'm accurate. I don't want to give you a stump, because I'm going to give you these documents as well. So it's $750,000, and there's plenty of cashola inside the fund. So the consideration is $750,000. So that's what we're paying, or effectively the transfer is going to be. For the loan amount, we can have up to, remember we had a look at the guidelines last week, it's 70%. So let's say the loan amount is effectively, we go the max, and so 70%, I'll just put in there $470,000 for that loan amount. The rest obviously would be paid cash, but we can either do cash or a contribution, either way, particularly if we're looking at disposing. There might be CGT as their work. So what I would be doing is, in part, potentially a sale, because once we've transferred the two properties over, we've got cash inside the company. I would liquidate that company. So you don't need that company anymore and pay out a liquidation dividend. So, but if we've got a tax liability inside the company before we liquidate, if that makes sense, I would get rid of that by claiming a tax deductible contribution on behalf of John and also Sally inside Develop. And I think that that's pretty crucial, or John if he's the only director. So again, we can put in whatever we want and claim that as a tax deductible contribution, if that makes sense. So we transfer the property over. It's an LRBA, and then effectively we're off and running for that one. So that's important. We've just got to be careful about stamp duties there. If it's in New South Wales, it'd be best off to have that property in the name of the individual, because then you can transfer it over for only $500 stamp duty. The loan period is 15 years. We've got 5.94%. I need to change that. So I'll look at, I think it's the Safe Harbour interest rate 2021. Okay, so for 2021, it's that's gone down, 5.1 and 7.1. So I'll need to go and change that, obviously. So this would be 5.10. It's fixed. It's New South Wales. We have to do P&I payments, so you need to work out what that is. And let's say it's $1,200 per month. And what date is the loan and mortgage deed going to be? So that's it. So there's nothing more. So the other one where I'd be mucking around, effectively you've done the whole thing at once. So let's have a look at it. And then I'm going to show you how to do the 1322C, but we've got a problem there, which I'm sure most of you will know. So I download this. If I was sending this, if I'm going to do a document, I'd always chop it up into separate documents. So we've got a related party, LRBA establishment pack. As I said, portion of it is going to be the borrowing from the company. So if there's a borrowing from the company, then we're going to have to leave the company open. The alternative is, as I said before, if we liquidate the company, the property goes down into the name of the individual as a dividend. In fact, we could probably get it so that it goes over into the super fund and then claim that, the $500 concessional stamp duty under Section 62A of the New South Wales Duties Act. But the package we've got here is the Commissioner's Guidelines, which we looked at last week. The limited recourse borrowing arrangement, that's the minutes, the holding trust, remember we did that, the borrowing arrangement, the loan agreements, and then the mortgage deed. So if I go down here, you'll see the first one is the arm's length terms for limited recourse. Probably need to upgrade that now. I know, because the Commissioner leaves it open, just says whatever the rates are going to be. I don't think he's updated that as yet. So it goes through, gives lots of examples, so on and so forth. So it's not a big deal we want to fit in here. Although I do want to address one issue. Remember, we looked at this last week. This is for shares. So Safe Harbour 2, I'm just going to preempt it. The asset acquires a collection of stock exchange listed shares or units. So Safe Harbour 2 applies when SMSF is an LRBA, a collection of shares in a stock exchange listed company, or to acquire units in a stock exchange listed unit trust. So, but remember, we went back, and I want to bring your attention to this up front. So, so this guideline sets out the safe harbour terms on which the SMSF trustees may structure the LRBAs, blah, blah, blah. So, for example, we could have these related party borrowings. I chose to set it 70% because that's what the guideline. I could go up to 90% if I wanted to, but how am I going to do that? Well, I can't rely on I'd still use this document, but obviously it's not a bad thing. So I've got here, if SMSF trustees enter an arrangement which does not meet all of the safe harbour terms set out in this guideline, whilst the trustees are unable to be assured the Commission will accept the arrangement to be consistent with it, it does not mean the arrangement is deemed not to be arm's length terms. It goes on, it merely means that there is no certainty provided on this guideline. It's pretty obvious because it doesn't apply to it. The trustees will need to be able to otherwise demonstrate that the arrangement was entered into and maintained on terms consistent with arm's length dealing. One example of how a trustee may demonstrate this is by maintaining evidence that shows their particular arrangement is established and maintained on terms, and this is the key point, guys, that replicate the terms of a commercial loan that is available in similar circumstances. So you just need to show that this is available, or a letter of offer, etc. So when we go down here, so that's the upfront. We then go into the first document, which I talked about, is the limited recourse borrowing arrangement. So again, we go through this process. The trustees looking at it, they're looking at providing related party, lender, etc. We've got all the terms and conditions around that. We then go into the next one, which is the limited recourse borrowing arrangement deed of holding trust. So what I've got there is you've got that set of documents for that. So that's the holding trust. We've then got the limited recourse borrowing arrangement. So this is the bare trust. So we're having the minutes there, and obviously they're looking at the acquisition of the asset. We've got the identifier, etc., all there. Then we go through the related party loan agreements. We've got all the details there, so on and so forth. And then what we've got is our mortgage deed, which is required as well. So we've got all that. So that's perfect for property. So we do that for those two properties that were sitting in the company. Now, an alternative would be, I can go in and do the same documents here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to change it over. Well, what I need to do is actually go back in, and remember, I just go into home, I do related party, and up will pop the shares, which I'm going to do because I'm going to transfer the shares that develop in. So what I've got there is and this is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to start it again, and it's worthwhile. I mean, I know you guys are pretty busy, but it's certainly worthwhile having a play around at any point in time with a lot of our documents, because then you'll get to understand what each one has and the nuances for each one. So what I'm going to do here is develop. And I'll go through the share transfer. And there's a couple of issues that I want to raise on the way through. So the first one, no change. So the Smith Super Fund, I think I had that. And we've got the company. As I said before, once we get our new system, we'll be able to warehouse a lot of this information. So like our common parties, if you haven't tried the wills, make sure you come along tomorrow. It's a great session. You guys are going to love it because we'll be launching our LYD wills, and also LYD wills with testamentary trusts, and they effectively have got both of those. So just two. Both of those have got mirrors. So they're not mirrors, they're actually for mums and dads or spouses. So that's a really great little session. So come along to that, and we'll be going through our processes, and I'll go through a simple case study on that one. So make sure you come along to that. That's at 11 a.m. tomorrow. You can jump onto the website and have a look at that. You'll have a look at, I think it's, have a look at the notifications. Okay, so it should be, okay, so there you go. You just pop along to that one and up it'll pop. So these ones here, you're always going to have a look at that. So that's exciting. So let's go back here. Okay, so John, Sally, it's going to be done tomorrow. John's the thing. Okay, so I've got that. Holding trust details. So I'm just going to put develop shares trust. I'm going to do that here. So we do all exactly the same as I did before. It's quite separate. I can't just overwrite the one I had before, unfortunately. Okay, so 5 Smith Street. Now, this one we are going to have to watch out for stamp duties because it's going to be a land-rich company. So you just got to be careful on that one. So the minutes here, same thing. Tomorrow, John. Just auto select there, and then we're off and running. Now, the related party loan, the lender is not the company, remember? So that was where we had developed. It's actually the individual. So what I've got there is I've got John Smith, 5 Smith Street, Sydney, New South Wales, 2000. And I'm presuming here, if I add a trustee, no, that doesn't work. So that's not a button. So I'm just looking, you might have to do this for Sally's shares as well. But what I might do is I might go and see if I can put in there, add it so it becomes if they're jointly held. But if I then go down to the loan deed, so let's say that we've got, if they're, okay, we'll just say there's 750 each. So there's 2 properties in there. It's worth 1.5 million. So John owns half and his wife Sally owns half. So I'm looking at 750, we'll assume they're dollar shares. 750,000 shares in Develop Pty Limited. Consideration 750. Now the loan amount, it can only be 50%. Now, here's where we are going to have an issue because what we've got is I'm pushing this into PCG 2016/5, but it doesn't belong there because effectively, when we have a look at it, it's not a listed share and it's not listed unit trust. So as a consequence of that, So as a consequence of that, we need to go out to the market and see if we can find a party or a commercial party that would lend on those shares. Now, of course, they can't charge the underlying assets sitting in those shares. Remember, it can be transferred in even though it's residential property. And so, but then again, let's say that we get the loan amount of $500,000. So that's okay. And we can do it over 15 years. But the interest rate is 8.01%. So we've got a document that it's 8.01 for those sort of shares. And then it's variable. And then what happens, it's interest only. So what we can do there is just pay, let's say it's $1,000 per month interest only as per of offer. So that's okay. When will it start? The mortgage deed, blah, 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 and we're off and running. So that's a different one. Now, the only thing is I'll do, because we're getting close to the end of time, and I'll have this up and running for you. What we need to do for this one is effectively, if one of you come to me and say, look, Grant, we're going to do this, we need to build it, it's for off-market or it's outside PCG, then what I'll do is you just go through and build it, and then what I'll do is I'll give you the Word document for it so that you can go and de-cleanse it of the PCG. But if there's a couple of you, then what I'll do is I'll just draft it up, and I probably will draft ones up anyway that aren't in line with PCG 2016/5, particularly around properties, because there's a lot of lenders out there at the moment, and you just need to follow their guidelines rather than, because they've got much better LVRs. So we've got the arrangement. We're going to get that. So you need to clean up. See where it says here, promise is who'll be providing finance. And then what we need to do is just going to take those things out where we've got PCG. But as I said, if two of you come through to me, I'll definitely put a related party lender up there. So leave that with me. I'll cleanse that up. And then we just go through all of the situation, and it's no different. So the only problem about this, though, is it's only one LRBA. If the client wants to sell any of the shares, which is probably pretty unlikely, because effectively what will happen is this will sit on the pension side. There'll be cash coming in from rent. The company will pay tax on it, and then that will flow down as pension income, and then you'll get your franking credits from that. So that's an easy strategy to do it, but we do have to watch out for one CGT. But again, the individual can claim CGT or tax deduction for the contributions going in, because obviously there's a loan amount, but the rest is a transfer in. But of course, we could also release some of the cash. Not a big issue here because they're already over age 60. But what we do is we take a contribution as a deduction. We just have to watch out for stamp duty because it's a land-rich company. And then when we go in here, we're all basically A-OK. So we've got the holding trust property, we've got the related party loan, which is going to follow the T's and C's we've got from a letter of offer. What do I have here? So 8.01% for the life of the agreement. So effectively, we just follow that. So there's two ones there. My preference in this particular case study, so I can wrap it up for you, my preference here is, unless we can get it as business real property, then it may be an issue being able to transfer it over one way, shape or form. Transferring the shares is a lot easier, and it's also a lot easier at the back end. For example, if John dies, and John and Sally die together, if the assets can't be left inside the superannuation fund, the units or the shares can actually be split amongst family members. So it's a much better system, but the only issues there, as I said, not a big one on the tax. It's going to be the stamp duties, and also the also potentially stamp duties and the transfer over, and also whether we can get that letter of offer, whether we can get another financier, and I'm sure there's plenty around who would lend on that. The only issue is we can't take a charge on it. So obviously the rates are going to be a lot higher. But again, there's always going to be someone who will lend something. So you need to keep your irons in the fire for that one. So anyway, that's enough from me. I'll get this session up. Apologies about the actual video, but I'll send the link to that anyway for you. I'll probably won't cut out, I won't go through the editing. I'd rather just get this up onto the system and send it out to you this afternoon along with a link. But make sure you don't miss out on tomorrow's session, which will be great. So that's talking about mirroring wills. Anyway, thank you very much for attending. It's really appreciated. I will catch up with you. Their next session is going to be on, I think it's professionalism and ethics. But we'll certainly just keep an eye out on that one, and I'll see you tomorrow.